صحيح يا جنوبي يا جنوبي.
The Nile Project brings together musicians from 11 East African countries to compose and perform collectively. The project also raises awareness of water issues facing the Nile River Basin and beyond. John Mark Raffis speaks with Mina Girgis, co-founder and president, about how the project got started and what it seeks to accomplish. Girgis, who grew up in Egypt, also describes how the project's way of creating and performing music is unique.
Can you tell me a little bit about just a brief overview of the Nile Project?
So the Nile Project is an initiative I started about 3.5 years ago with my co-founder, Mikti Hadero. And the project started initially with the musical conversation we were curating. We were interested in bringing musicians together from the 11 Nile countries to collaborate on creating music that would both help expand people's cultural curiosity and musical curiosity in the Nile Basin about their river neighbors, and also facilitate conversation beyond music to get people to start talking more about the water conflict that we face and the water, issues we have to kind of overcome together. So it's a combination of music for conflict transformation, but also collaboration among cultures, and it has grown over the years to go beyond just the music. So it's grown to include a lot of university programs for university students to learn about all these different issues, to have dialogue around their different perspectives from different countries, and to allow them the chance to find ways they can contribute to the sustainability of the Nile, depending on what they're studying.
What first gave you the idea to start the Nile Project?
The idea came, the aha moment came after I had come back from spending a summer of 2011 in Tahrir Square in Egypt during the revolution. And at that time, I had started and was running a community world music school in San Francisco that's called Zambaleta, Zampaleta. And Zambaleta was a music school that allowed anyone to have access to learning music from any tradition in the world. So it was a very diverse curriculum of music classes that was open to anyone in the community. And I was going back to Egypt. I was, in the revolution, and I'm trying to think of how I could use my work, my specialty in applied ethnomusicology and in the music education work that I've done to contribute in one way or another to Egypt post-revolution. And with that question in mind, I came back to San Francisco after that summer, and I went to an Ethiopian concert by some of our friends at Debo Band, the band that was playing. And at that point, I just asked myself, I'm doing all this work here in San Francisco to help people have access to music from everywhere in the world. But I grew up in Egypt, and I was never exposed to the music of Ethiopia, which is a river neighbor. How relevant would that be to Egyptians today, especially that this exposure would play such a significant role in transforming the nature of the relationship between Egyptians, Ethiopians, and other countries. So that's kind of the where the Nile Project was born. My background, though, is in I did my master's in the music of the Gypsies, and I worked with Gypsy music groups from different parts of the world. And I was writing about the power of these kinds of narratives in the world music industry, the narratives that cross geographies, that cross regions, and that kind of create a musical thread that goes across areas of the world we would not normally associate with one another.
There are 11 countries in the Nile Basin, and you would know better than I that those countries are quite different. How do you go about harnessing those differences and bringing people together and to work together?
Well, that's an art, and I think creating a hospitable environment for people to find ways to develop that sense of trust, to start seeing what they share, what they have in common, what they have in common because they have shared the Nile for so long. So it's not only the water resource that the Nile represents to many of these countries, which is a very utilitarian way of thinking about why these people should collaborate, why these people should have a conversation, because they are faced with the fact that otherwise they will have a water conflict. But also, what have they shared for thousands of years before even their nation states had crystallized into the names we know now, Ethiopia or Egypt? What has this environmental corridor in East Africa facilitated in the transportation of ideas and the transportation of culture and the mobility of different ethnic groups up and down the river? What can we look at that we haven't really opened our eyes to, that would allow us to see how much we share more than what sets us apart? For us, that art is our music. When you come to our concert and you see how carefully designed the music is, we don't have any leader. We're working with a participatory leadership model where the group on stage is rotating leaders depending on the song that is being sung. And with that leadership, the vision of the group changes. Every musician who is leading a song is also bringing that vision, how they would like this group to sound. So you have actually 13 groups that are folded into those 13 members. And with every song, you have a different sound that allows you to see how each of us sees the fact that we're all here and here together. That experience, as ephemeral, as abstract as it sounds, can be really empowering.
When the musicians collaborate, they actually get together to compose collectively, right?
That's correct. Yep.
And in many cases, you're probably bringing together musical traditions and instruments that historically really weren't connected, other than the river ran through the lands where people used those instruments.
Exactly.
Do you feel in some ways as though the Nile Project is creating new genres?
We're certainly creating music that hasn't been created before. I mean, this is a first in terms of bringing musicians from those 11 countries together. And the music that they come up with, you may decipher one of our songs as like more Ethiopian or more Egyptian or more Sudanese, but then the Egyptian song has an Ethiopian singer singing in Amharic, and then the Sudanese song has a Burundian solo, and has Ugandan playing percussion, and has instruments from Kenya and from Rwanda and from Burundi. So the arrangement, the style, the rhythms, the polymodal exercises we put together, you have the music of Egypt superimposed on the music of Ethiopia. So you can't really tease it apart. Whether that is considered a new genre or not, I mean, I think that's kind of more of a personal decision, but we consider it to be non-music, and that's what we strive for. We strive to make a stew rather than a salad. If you look at most of the world music fusion projects that exist in the world, have given little attention to the process and more attention to the product. You bring musicians together that are masters in their own traditions, and they come together and they quickly cook up some fusion that is more like you can still see like the different styles. Most people don't spend weeks educating the musicians in their respective styles, so that you have a Ugandan who can play Egyptian maqam, an Egyptian who can play Ugandan polyrhythms on every song.
Experience the multicultural music of the Nile Project in concert April 23, 2015 at Penn State's Eisenhower Auditorium. For tickets or information, visit CPA.PSU.EDU or phone 800-ARTS-TIX.